Welcome back, everybody. Thirsty Thursday, number 22, training for all departments. Tonight we have an excellent group of folks here with us. Some retired careermen, some guys that are still working on the job, vast amounts of experience, calls that you can dream up. These guys have probably done it. So I can say that I'm personally excited for what we're talking about tonight, just as I am for every other night. But I think this one's going to be really good. So with that, we're going to kick it around the horn and do the introductions, and we'll get started because, again, we try to keep it to an hour, and who knows how long we could talk tonight. But that's where we're going to go. So, Trevor, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Really excited tonight. We have a great panel full of people. These are folks I have a great deal of respect for in the fire service. Some I've known since I was let's just say a lot younger, and some I haven't known quite as long. But a lot of great background, especially in the training and experience aspects of whatever's going on. And looking forward to throwing some questions at them and seeing what they have to say. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Bobby, and then we'll get to our guests of honor.
All right. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks, everybody. Hey, thanks, guys, for coming on. This is awesome. What we want to talk about tonight is just a little bit about what the different challenges are between urban career departments and volunteer departments, the challenges of training. So we just recently had a anniversary of the Black Sunday and FDNY, which had to do with guys had to bail out fourth floor windows, and they had some fatalities. And the backstory behind that was there were conversations about having rescue rope in their gear. But in New York City, when you're talking about 12 or 13,000 people, it's a huge undertaking to do anything like that. It's millions of dollars in training and equipment and things like that. And so obviously after the Black Sunday, they did receive that kind of equipment and that kind of training. So there's challenges, I'm sure, in the urban departments when you want to make a change. And I'm sure Mike will probably talk about some of the Mayday and RIT things he's working on in Baltimore City. But there's big challenges when you have thousands of people that you have to get trained or equipped or whatever it may be. And so we want to talk a little bit in the first half just about the challenges of what it takes for larger urban departments to kind of get training out there as new things come along or whatever. But also we want to talk about what happens here. And luckily the three guys we have on have all had experience in urban departments, but they've also had experience in smaller mixed volunteer departments with training and things like that, had their hand in that too. So we want to talk about the challenges in the smaller departments, getting the training out where you don't have quite as strong a chain of command at times, where a lot of times the person that's in charge of you is elected by the popular majority, those types of things. And all those things have an effect on training in very different ways. So it's going to be a fun night for us just to talk about these things. And there's a lot of people here, so I just kind of want to get started. So if you three guys, we'll start with Dypsky there and go to Steve and Mike. But Dypsky, if you want to talk about your history of training in your fire department over in DC and also in Ocean City a little bit, and then we'll just go around to kind of do introductions for everybody. So thanks for everybody for coming.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Greg Dypsky, and grew up in Ocean City, Maryland, and started in the cadets. I think Trevor was a year or two maybe behind me. Cadets 14 to 18, so it's like a junior program. And then I was a fireman, and then I said I want to be a career fireman. So I went on the other side of the Bay Bridge and was lucky enough to get hired by DC at the age of 20. And gave them 31 years and retired in 2016 after 31 years. And I spent at least 2/3 of my career in like special ops, either on an engine in the house with the collapse unit with the Rescue 3 or actually on a rescue company. So that's kind of my background. And I volunteered the whole time I was a career in a career department. I always volunteered somewhere. Did like 4 years at Kentland, then I moved and lived in Waldorf and volunteered there. So I've seen it from both sides, trying to be as active as possible. That's it for me.
Steve?
How are you guys? Steve Huovinen. Where I started in Delaware. There's a small little rural fire company called Millville back in the 80s. After that, I spent about 5 years there and went back to Baltimore where I grew up and was a Baltimore City police officer for a few years. And then I got hired in the city of Wilmington, Delaware. So I've been there for 26 years, hold the rank of lieutenant. In my career in Wilmington, I spent 18 years on Rescue 1. After that was disbanded, I got promoted and stayed in Special Ops. I'm actually assigned to a unit called Squad 4, who takes care of all the Special Ops and the elements of what that entails. Other than that, I'm an instructor, pro board instructor, pro board officer, rescue tech, all that stuff. So that's about it. I'm kind of boring. So.
Cool, Mike. You want to round us out?
Yeah, I'm Michael Wood. I'm a firefighter, actually a chauffeur up in Baltimore City, and I'm on my 17th year up there, and I just took promotion from acting lieutenant to driver and tillerman, and I also do training coordination for Ocean City. I've been, I guess, hamstrung, so to speak, because I've always been in a large department, and it wasn't until moving down here to Ocean City that I actually got a look at the volunteer world and how small departments operate. So it was I was shell shocked, so to speak, to be exposed to both of them at the same time. I was never a volunteer before I joined the department, before I joined Baltimore. So it was eye opening in lots of great ways, and it presents lots of challenges too. So I'm excited to be here to talk about it tonight.
Awesome. Thank you guys again for joining us. Like we've said, it's going to be a great evening. How can we not get started without a cheers?
Cheers.
All right, boss man. She's all yours.
All right, gentlemen, got some questions for you. As you all know from your experience in Ocean City, and it's a little bit surreal for me to say this because I've been going it'll be 5 years next November, believe it or not. Ocean City is that kind of weird hybrid where it can be a small town, small department. It's a combination career volunteer department, very active on both sides. And yet we become the second largest city in the state for 4 months out of the year, second only to Baltimore. So we have, a high call volume for a lot of the year. We have a lot of urban issues. We have some suburban issues, and up until more recently, we had even some rural issues out towards the mainland and the southwest part of the territory. So you all come from different areas and also had that experience in Ocean City. So I want to talk about two different things and see if you guys can weigh in on this. And Mike, I've had a chance to go up and actually do some adjunct instructing for Baltimore City, and it's very unique to see how a lot of the strictly urban departments handle themselves. And very much like in the situation I'm in, a lot of people get in their silos. So if we have let's say the Baltimore City way or the DC way or the Wilmington way, and the neat thing about Ocean City is we bring a lot of people from outside with a lot of different viewpoints, which is great for training. But to the point that was being discussed prior to coming live, sometimes that can be a little bit confusing because we're trying to find that proficiency of that go-to way, the 85% way that we try to handle most of our calls. So you guys bring a lot of skill sets, a lot of knowledge. But if you guys could talk about your experience from not only the combination fire service, the small town, big city of Ocean City combination there versus where you focus on your main career jobs, and what are some things that you see if you had a chance to kind of build your own fire department based on all this stuff? What are the things that you would cherry pick and best practices you bring forward? So, Dip, as the senior man here, and that's I mean that with all due respect and love.
That guy down on that other side. No, brother. I can't point right with this thing.
Hey, you're already pulling a pension check, so brother, I'm gonna kick it over to you, Dip, and let us know your thoughts on stuff.
Well, training. I was involved with a lot of the training in DC, being on the rescue, and it was kind of the battalion chief kind of let us. We had a semi guideline in writing, but he kind of let my chief at least let the company officers he gave us free reign as long as we were out doing something, pertaining to our job. He was all for it. And, we kind of got to some places that a couple of times we might have got in a little bit of trouble for being there. But my theory is it's easier to beg forgiveness than ask permission sometimes. So, but we took advantage of some abandoned buildings and did a lot of, training, and we probably shouldn't have been in them. But on the other hand, there's a lot, if you have scheduled training, I've run into this, and I don't know if any of you guys in the career departments have run into this. You have scheduled training. They say, next 4 you're going to the training academy to do this. And I come in as the officer, and, 2 or 3 of my guys have called in sick or got annual leave because they didn't want to go. So it's, so sometimes it's better, instead of having something set in stone, just to kind of wing it. And, being up here, like with training and ice training, last year we couldn't do it because there was no ice. Now this year, you never know. So again, you got to be flexibility seems to be the name of the game. So.
Yeah, Dip, and I hear you. I'm having problems doing ice training in my department right now too.
Yeah. But that's, and I've been told sometimes that when I was doing some training that it was, guys wanted to learn about the widget that's on the piece that's used once every 10 years, instead of wanting to go, and they don't know the proficiency of, pulling lines and throwing ladders. That is I don't care what anybody says, that is the basics of the fire service. If you can't pull lines proficiently or throw ladders proficiently, doesn't have to be professionally, just show some proficiency. There's no real sense to move on to, the widget that's used once every 10 years. We use lines and ladders every day. So that's my theory.
Yeah, and to kind of dovetail into that a little bit, I know that especially in the larger departments, it might go by individual companies, or in a place like Ocean City, it might be based on the shift, where you almost have 4 separate fire departments, A, B, C, and D, that kind of do their own thing. So from your guys' experience, and Steve, I'll pop over to you next. How do you combine those things? How do you get, like what Greg's talking about, the people might be disinterested in the company-wide training, but yet make sure that your crew is the most proficient it can be without creating so much variance in the way people operate?
Yeah, to add with what he was saying, I am familiar with Ocean City. I did work part-time there for a few years back in maybe about 10 years ago. So I'm familiar with, the career, volunteer, part-time situation you got down there. And I know with the 3 career guys that are here right now, it starts with minimum standards, and that starts at the fire academy itself. So we have the luxury of being, we were on all career departments. We didn't have the combination with the volunteers or even a part-time staff. So you work side by side with the minimum standards of those guys coming out and whoever coming out of the fire academies, which when you get to the combination departments, a little bit different. You have different levels now of minimum standards. The experience I had with some of the volunteer combination departments is that they held their career guys on a higher level than the volunteers, which is it wrong? Is it right? I couldn't tell you. But with the scheduling, if you ask me, that is the toughest aspect of it. With guys being off sick, Kelly Day, vacation, things like that, and you're trying to get minimum training, even a monthly training drill, or something that your battalion wants, something that admin wants, it can be very difficult. Then if you would add like the volunteer aspect into there, how do you schedule that? Maybe it has to be at night, weekends, and then part-time. They're just part-time employees. They show up whenever they're scheduled, even if they do show up. So the scheduling is huge, but I believe minimum standards, especially with DC, Baltimore, and even Wilmington, it's coming out of the Fire Academy. At least we had that, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. So.
Understood. And Mike, from your perspective, and especially in Baltimore, I know a lot of departments have SOP or mission-driven tasks. Whereas, to Steve and Dip's point, sometimes as the officer in that combination department, you might have to base your tactics on not what your SOGs or SOPs or procedures are going to be, but actually who you got riding with you that day. So, if you guys could kind of talk, and Mike, I'll kick it over to you. You go down that rabbit hole for a minute as well, in addition to the other things we just talked about.
Yeah, that's something that all the major urban and metropolitan departments have an advantage with, is that their foundation is built around their MOPs, SOGs, their training manuals, and they're able to churn out that factory of trained firefighters much more easily because of that. With a big thing, of course, is having their own academy, whereas down here in Ocean City, we have to kind of piecemeal that together. So we're not operating off of our set standards, which obviously are paramount. We do have to wing that. And, the one thing that's important to remember is that, in these large areas, you have all these different jurisdictions within. We can refer to them as box areas as well, but not just that, but you take a city like Baltimore, and if you are strictly downtown in Baltimore, and I'll come at it from a perspective of truck companies, because that's what I can relate to the best. If you're a driver of a truck company in downtown Baltimore, 99% of the time, when you go up that aerial ladder to the roof, you're operating on a flat roof, and your vertical ventilation is all based in flat roof scenarios. Now, if you go over to Northwest Baltimore, your drivers, when they throw that aerial, they're going to balloon frame construction, single family dwellings that were built back in the 50s, and they have a heck of a pitched roof on them. So they're dealing with the knee wall issue and possible fire spread because of the balloon frame. So the thing to remember that within departments like this, the training that you get at the academy, those minimum standards, is based solely initially on a book and the certifications that come along with the state's recommendations. But within a major fire department, there's a bunch of little fire departments. And that's an example, is that truck company in the Northwest section of Baltimore, their tactics and strategies are completely different than a downtown truck would be. And a lot of times those worlds never mix. And that sounds crazy, and even in a small city like Baltimore, but we found that without progressive training, without taking members of these reputable members of these truck companies and sending them out to the academy to sit down with instructors and talk about some of the tactics that they use, that our training remains stagnant. And some of these guys, and I'm one, I was on the same truck company in downtown Baltimore for 16 years, up until just 2 months ago. So now that I'm climbing on peaked roofs that are all slate, it's almost like relearning the job. And that's a curse of some major departments, because there is no movement. It's not like Ocean City, where one day you're riding at Station 4 and the next day you're down at headquarters. Instead of on the medic unit, you're driving a tower out of there. And then the next day you're on, your next shift, you're up at Station 3 riding an engine. So you're not as dynamic in these larger departments. And because of that, you have to be more proactive and progressive with your training, and realize that within these major departments, there literally is, if you have, 16 truck companies, you have 16 little truck company departments that all operate with different tactics. Sure, we were all trained under the same umbrella of the Baltimore City Fire Academy, but recognize what that academy teaches. It teaches to a set standard, developed by a textbook, and then you're sent out into the world to learn the job as your jurisdiction dictates it, by men that have been in that jurisdiction for years and have developed tactics that work with them, their manpower, their apparatus, and so on down the line. So I know that was a little long-winded, but that essentially is the pro and con of a large metropolitan apartment versus a department that's mixed in its sizes and of course its manpower complements.
No, Mike, that makes perfect sense. And Bobby, get you to weigh in here because I know you're in charge of, to a great degree, of taking all these different thought processes and facts and opinions and trying to put them together in something operational. How's that working out for you?
Well, I passed the baton to Mike over there. So, one thing that I've learned through all this is I remember we've had DC's like just a hiring factory now. They just hire people after people. And I remember talking to guys that were going through their academy in DC, and I remember they were very particular about this is called a hook, this is called a pipe, this is called, and I thought, how silly that is, and it's just I thought it was more of like a historical kind of thing. However, after hearing it for a while and seeing things happen, I saw some fires in Ocean City where everyone had different terminology and things were misunderstood. And so, I don't want to get into specifics of it because I don't want to implicate anybody, but what was happening was people had a different language. So some people called it a deuce and a half. Some people called it a large line. Some people called it a long line. Some people called it a mall line. Some people, when you're riding down the street and you're going to a working fire and someone yells out to pull a mall line and you think it's a long line, or whatever, mistakes happened, I think, just basically on a terminology. So I think what I learned from all of that was even though we have so many different influences in Ocean City, every single Mid-Atlantic department, I think, is represented in our part-time staff at times. We have to develop an Ocean City way, and that's where Mike is really trying to do that this is the best way in Ocean City to do what we need to do, and we probably need to adopt more terminology and more radio discipline with all of that kind of stuff, things like that. So one thing I really wanted to kind of touch on with you guys in this first half hour, though, is I really wanted to touch on what are the challenges when you have a change. And I'm going to go to you last, Mike, because I know you're going through a huge Mayday writ project in Baltimore City. The question is, once you come up with there's a new thing coming out that really needs to be done in your fire departments, and I'll start with you, Dypsky. How did you guys translate that to a large urban department to go basically citywide? So can you guys talk, did you have experiences with that, and how did it work, and how did you actually make it happen? So Dypsky, I'll go to you first, bro.
What was the question again, Bobby? Because you were like, speak up.
So if you had a significant change that would happen in DC Fire that you needed to do training department wide, how did you have experience with that? How did you implement that training department wide, say a new RID or a new procedure or something like that? How did you guys implement that training citywide?
Well, I was lucky enough to be in Special Ops Division when they decided to, I guess I forget exactly what the word is, but we kind of got like academy status or whatever. So one of the first classes that I was involved with was a rope rescue class. So we got all the interested parties that had some knowledge of rope rescue, got them all together. We all sat down and argued and fought and hashed it out, and came up with our own manual and a way that we wanted to teach it. And it worked out pretty good that, in other words, like you were talking before, the Ocean City way, that was the DC way. We took a little bit of CMC stuff and a little bit of all the places, and a couple guys have been to classes here and there, and then we put it all in a book, but we tweaked it to try to A, make it the DC way, and B, to try to make it as simple as possible. You can have trigonometry ways to do things, but 3 o'clock in the morning, who can remember that? You want to try to make it as simple as possible. The old 3 o'clock in the morning when people are not bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, so these are the knots we want to use. There's 5 of them instead of 55 of them, so, and things like that. So that's, we took it and ran with it. And then it went on to, I've talked to some of the guys up there. They even got, the collapse and trench. We've got our own textbook and teaching for that, and a confined space, etc. So it wasn't a incident that happened. It was just we foresaw and said, let's try to do it this way instead of somebody else's way. So
Cool. Steve, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, Bobby, you said probably the worst word in the fire service language, and that is the word change. Everyone knows about that. So how do we look at that as a career department? Well, it goes down to simple as your boss is changing as to a piece of equipment changing. So it's difficult sometimes. So the biggest thing is the need for that change. And as a supervisor, we have to almost educate ourselves, not only in the change or why do we need that change and what are we changing to? So we actually have to buy into that first to actually implement it to our personnel with a positive attitude, whether you like it or not. Because in a career department, when change is coming, it's coming and it's permanent. So I always tell my guys, and they hear it all the time, that it's not a good idea unless it's their idea. So you can complain all you want. It's their idea. We're going to it. I've been in the fire service since like '88. So I don't even know how many years that is. The amount of change that we've had has been incredible. Just technology, RIT, but there was no RIT back then. We didn't even know what RIT was. Just we talk about ropes and high angle, the amount of equipment, even like now, the stuff that I trained on as originally, we still have in our bag. We don't even bring it out anymore, and it's antique compared to what we're doing now. It's still, we can still use it, but we don't even train with it anymore. So, but the technology with computers and just our breathing apparatuses, the amount of technology that's built into that, the change that came with that is incredible. So change is the hardest thing in the fire department to overcome. As leaders or supervisors or senior men or whatever you want to call what you are or who you are or who you're getting out to, it starts with that attitude of recognizing what the change is for, a positive attitude to get that out to your personnel, and then working with it, making it your own. Say for instance, the thermal imaging cameras. I remember the day that we first got an thermal imaging camera. This thing was a piece of crap. We didn't know how to use it. That's why, because we weren't trained on it. Now we have 2 on every piece of apparatus. We wouldn't know what to do without them. So, as leaders or company officers or inspiring company officers, it's the attitude that's going to help that change, and your self-motivation to understand it, why it's there, and if it's a piece of equipment, if it's an SOP or SOG or whatever you want to call them, and it starts, and it goes from the top to the bottom and the bottom to the top. So hope that helped.
Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, change is that word that no one wants to hear. And, there's different levels of what we can accomplish when we talk about change, of course. The easiest is absolutely going to be at the company level. When we're talking about major departments, your changes at the company level can be made simply with the captain and dissemination of his wishes to his lieutenants. And then that waterfall effect happens. Those changes are easy to wrap your head around for the most part because they're at such a a low level. Now, when we get into to major changes, such as a redevelopment of RIT or just operational changes in general, the big hurdles that are seen, and I think everyone can attest to this that's been in a large department, is that the first thing that gets discussed anytime we're making a major operational change is money, dollar signs. How much is this going to cost us? And there is a limit that they're willing to go and a limit that they're willing to spend in order to make any operational changes at the whoosh of the working class or the firefighters. The other large hurdle, and I think that I don't just speak for the department that I've worked with, is you need, in order to have a surefire catalyst for change, you need a major incident that will precipitate that, or unfortunately, you need a major accident that a lot of times, unfortunately, involves a line of duty death. And then the money and the change, those gates open up and just dump onto your lap, and you're allowed to start doing that. That is the plague of a large department, is that we, with the exception of technology, our change operationally is very much reactive. I think you have better opportunities in smaller mixed departments, such as Ocean City as an example, to be more progressive and more proactive in your training, which will also facilitate that necessary change, just because it doesn't have as much channels that it has to go through, and it's not only do you deal with money in these larger departments, you have such a large administration. And I think one thing we can all agree on too when we speak of administration is that a lot of times the good ideas at an operational level need to be the good ideas of the guys wearing the white helmets. And egos get in the way of that. Inexperience gets in the way of that. And sometimes where that disconnect is from the black helmets to the white helmets, it's hard to bridge that gap to explain why that change is necessary at an operational level, because many times, your administration has not rode on those rigs in quite a while, and that makes it very difficult for that line of communication to be open, I think. But those are some hangups that do not allow for that operational style change, that major change to occur in a lot of departments.
Mike, I agree with you 98%. The only 2% I'm going to push back on you is that I don't believe it's that difficult. It's an unwillingness from the upper management to do it. Not so much that it can't be done. It's that they don't want to do it. And I speak, I'll kind of get on both sides of this, but before I do, there's a burning question. I want to get back to the whole change management issue. But Steve, are you drinking wine? Is that what I'm saying?
I am. Absolutely.
Okay, I had to check, because first, let me say, number one, you're a classy individual. I mean, you probably step out of the shower to take a leak. That's how classy you are. Anyway, getting back to it, Mike, I agree with you 100%. And here's one of the things that I've looked at, and we try to do this in Ocean City. I know I try to do it in my department. Same thing. There's a lot of things that look great on paper, or you go to the latest leadership conference and come back all full of piss and vinegar that we're going to make these changes from the administrative level on down. And there's a lot of wisdom in the trenches. And Greg had mentioned this a little bit earlier. If you could take a core group of your hard chargers in your department, whether it's the special ops guys, the truck guys, the hose folks, whatever, it doesn't matter. But instead of having an edict come down from on high that looks great on paper and say, so shall be done, this is your new SOG, how about you put it out there to the training, get that group of guys together, and we say, look, we're 85% on board with this. And I'm not talking about saving the baby by committee, okay, because we're going to have 200 different opinions on stuff. But coming in and saying, look, here's our goal. Make the goal very clear to everybody and say, this is what we want to do. Here's why we're trying to change it. When people understand the why behind something, they can buy into it. And it's okay for them to ask why. And you can't get butthurt as a chief officer, as a lieutenant, or anybody with a bugle on their front piece when someone says, well, why is that? There's a way and manner to ask that question, but still, nevertheless, if they understand why they're doing something, they buy into it. But when you train and your SOG comes out of training versus trying to train to an SOG or an MOP or whatever the latest and greatest operational guideline is going to be this week, that's what's tough, because right away the firefighters, the boots on the ground, I mean, if it doesn't pass the sniff test right away, they don't buy into it, and they're going to discount it and go back to what they know, and that goes back to the A, B, C, and D shift fire department. So I want to throw that to you guys from your experience. I know some of you have been brought into that in your own career departments. Do you see a better way to, if a chief officer or the administration comes in and says, we want to be better at X, Y, and Z, here's why we want to be better. And like you guys said, if there's a trigger event that occurred, then everyone's under the gun to make it happen. But if we're being proactive and say we want to be better at truck placement, we want to be better at doing whatever, how do we more proactively go and bridge that gap? Because Mike, I agree, it can be done. It's just how do we create that willingness that the administration will come down and say, okay, here's what we need to do, here's why we need to do it, and you guys are the smart ones, the boots on the ground. You give your feedback, and then we will build the SOP after we train to it and work the bugs out, versus throwing an SOP down your throat and then making you live with it on the street. So I kind of threw that grenade at you guys, but I want to get some feedback on that for the audience.
No, but I agree with what you're saying, because I've had this discussion probably this week with my guys, is saying instead of throwing an SOP out there or some kind of a change in tactics, whatever, let's try. Let's do a trial period, maybe a 3-month. Let's see if it actually works and work the bugs out. Instead of writing the SOP and now we're bound to that SOP. Let's do a trial period. And that's something we don't do where I'm at. It's pretty much it's if it's written, that's what we have to do. Effective on that date. So and then hopefully we have some input to maybe tweak it some if they want to or not. So but I see maybe a trial period if that's feasible.
And to the point that you guys made before, that a lot of the people who are writing this, not that they're not bad or stupid people, and they might have a lot of great experience, but the recency of that experience and the conditions, they might not have ridden backwards in a long time or been in that position where they have to make a decision. So
it could come down to equipment, it could come down to personnel, all that. So that's why, if you ask me, it should be just some kind of trial period to see if it actually does work, if it fits for us. And if it doesn't, let's go to plan B.
Well, Mike, what do you guys think?
Well, and like I was saying before, a lot of times, instead of this is the way we're going to do it coming from the top down, if it's done at the bottom and then thrown up to them, like I said, with our rope stuff or anything, if you get, this is the way we want to, re-rack our lines. Let's get guys from busy companies, busy engine companies, or if this is the way, this is the new way we want to cut these routes. Get guys from busy truck companies or whatever, get them together, let them hash it out. And then, because you know how it goes in a fire department, gossip's going to go around. They're going to, it's going to, like within a week, everybody in the department's going to know, hey man, it's Greg and Mike and Steve. They're on that. They're all working on this new thing for us. This new, how we're going to operate the widget. So those guys are pretty good. They've been around a while. Instead of, Chief John and Chief Joe and somebody else telling us how we're going to do it. It's the guys that are actually going to be doing it all the time, writing the manual and setting the standards. So sometimes that, like, I think like Bobby or whoever just said, that passes a sniff test a little easier because the guys know it's been thought out a little bit more than just somebody sitting behind a desk and just trying to shove it down your throat. So,
yeah, I think recognizing that change isn't a bad word anymore will go a long way. Things are always changing around us. It's tradition is very important to have. However, there are certain elements of it when it comes to operations and things of that nature that you have to accept and adopt. That change is good. And you need to kind of live by that law. An example would be, up in Baltimore, one thing that they've started doing now in the academy is they've invited some of us from the field, specifically to our discipline. They brought some truck company operators in and some engine company fellas, and they've allowed us to revamp the training manual, make it more of a living document than it has been in the past. Understanding that change is important as construction changes, apparatus changes, technology advances, that we need to also change with it, or we're going to become a dinosaur individually. So it is important that we adopt those new proactive approaches to our training. We've also brought in members of reputable members of truck companies and engine companies to do retraining with our companies out in the field. So they've went around and collected groups of truckmen that they have a good reputation. They brought them out to the academy, and one day a week, we'll be teaching out there, and they will send a truck or two to us for the day, and we will just go over new tactics that have been developed in the city and tactics that are appropriate for us. Just new ways of doing things or more advanced ways of doing things, and we take that time to ping pong back and forth and learn from each other and to teach some new things. So we're doing that with our truck companies, we're doing that with our engine companies, so that you not only get the academy way, much like every major department gets, but after you learn all that, you're coming back to the academy and being taught by firefighters that are active in the city, and you're being taught those Baltimore, quote unquote, tactics that can help you within your respective jurisdictions of Baltimore. Because as I said again, in these major areas, administration has to realize that there are fire companies within their fire department, and they do things completely different. And they are just an invaluable resource. They're priceless to have guys like that are students of their trade, and then also want to disseminate that information and knowledge that they have. But those guys have to be brought together. Going back to what we talked about with that disconnect, you can't be reliant on administration to teach new tactics and strategies. That disconnect is there. It is what it is. That taking that position, that disconnect is going to happen. That's just part of becoming administration, and that's okay. There's no problem with that. It's just important to remember that you must always have guys in place that you respect and that you can lean on to bridge that gap. There has to be men in place to bridge the gap from the trenches to the offices, and they have to, they do have to bear the burden of training, but at the same time, they have to be, they kind of have to be held and put up on that mantle and be acknowledged. I think that is it's an invaluable thing in a fire department to have, no matter what size of the department.
Yeah, and Mike, I agree with you. Ben, if you don't mind, while we're waiting for Steve to come back, Brother Justin here had a question asking specific to Steve if your members have riding backwards have any input on the SOG or MOP. during the trial period, or is this something that's just pushed down from upper management? And want Steve to weigh in on that, but just to kind of pseudo answer that before he gets back on, one of the things that I would say, with that is, and maybe this is just the leadership and supervision courses that we teach coming out, but when we talk about that 360-degree leadership, we talk about those circles of influence and control. And that inner circle is what you control. That's your ability to get up, go to work on time, show up to work on time, train no matter what anyone else is doing, your attitude and your work performance. And then you have that circle of influence, and then the outer circle is where you have no influence or control whatsoever. So I would say, and not speaking for Steve, because I want him to weigh in on it, but honestly, I think it's really how you bring it up. If you have those company level officers or administrative level officers that you can go and say, hey, chief, captain, whomever, here's something that I think can make this better. And the way you frame it to them, because look, people are people, and you guys have worked with us, where we've had that, very ego-driven officer that you really got to pat him on the behind and make him feel good about himself, and others that you could go up to them and really question their mother's lineage, and they'd still be okay with you because they know you're being honest with them. So, from that perspective, I think that yes, people riding backwards do have an influence, and they channel it up through their company level officers, but the wisdom is truly in the trenches, man. I mean, the guys, the boots on the ground are doing this every day, and stuff that looks good on paper or as bullet points doesn't always pan out on the street. So, while we're waiting for Steve to come back on, Dip or Bobby or Mike, do you guys have any thoughts on that as far as the influence from the bottom up?
Can I jump in real quick?
Yeah.
It's been a little while now, but we changed from our bumper loads from a Kentland style load to the Lexington load that we saw in Ocean City, and that was something that we started from the bottom up. And we wrote up the proposal, we sent it up, and like Steven mentioned, we got to do a trial. One of the things that we identified was an issue for us in the Salisbury Fire Department was we did a trial of that load just on one engine. So we're staffing 2 engines, 1 truck, and only that one engine had the Lexington load on it. So when we went to our next trial, after that trial period was over for the Lexington load, we ended up putting that across the department for all the frontline apparatus. And then the next trial that we did, we added a 350 line off the back. And that was something that we ended up changing and putting on all of our engines across the department. So it didn't matter if you were at 16 or 1, we had that same thing. And it was much better received that way because everybody got the opportunity to see it in their firehouse. Everybody got the opportunity to train with it and become comfortable with it. And I think we were also blessed with our upper management. Our fire chief, he said, I'm not going to pull it. I don't really like. He doesn't say he doesn't care, but like I said, he's not pulling it. So if it's something that we think as the people riding the apparatus every day is going to make us better, that's what we're going to go with. So as long as he's getting positive feedback and it's coming up through that he's on board with it. So just something from the volunteer combination side with that. So.
Sorry about that. My daughter called. So I forget I can hear you, but what was the question again? So I can answer the young man's question.
So the question was, do you think the members riding backwards have any input on that SOG or MOP trial period, or is that just upper management to make those recommendations?
We did in the past. I believe I now it pretty much comes from upper management. Or not even upper management, we'll say, but like battalion chief and above. It's not too much of even lieutenant and below. We might have a suggestion, but the SOP or SOG will be written and implemented without input from the lower half at all. So, and it's kind of forced, and we're the ones that have to work with the bugs and get them out. But still the SOP will stand as written. if that helps.
Actually, Steve, it does. And Bobby and Mike, especially for this, and you as well, Ben, I want to focus in on Scotty's question. He says, on the volunteer side, any ideas on how to keep your training interesting so that the members want to attend? And I know this is always a challenge because we're trying to keep things fresh. We're trying to keep people engaged. I'll weigh in on this real quick, and I want to go to you guys. One of the things that I found valuable on the volunteer end is making it specific to the individual. And I'm not talking about having a individual training program for each person, but for the riding positions we have on the engine. So if you got the irons, you need to be the best person at the irons that you possibly can be. If you're riding third, if you're riding behind the if you're riding behind the driver and you've got the hook in the can, you need to know the functions of that. So sometimes we take each one of the riding positions, not saying that the volunteers are always going to be guaranteed to be in that position, but some are. And that we kind of go around the horn a little bit. So it's essentially saying, all right, we're going to make it very job specific. And that gives them an experience I've had so far with some of the volunteers in my department, is that gives them a lot more confidence and proficiency to say, hey, if you're riding this position, this is your job. Know how to do your job, well. And if you have questions or you don't know how to do it, we're going to train on it until you can't get it wrong. So that's just one of those things we looked at to say, to make it riding position specific. That's kind of helped out to keep it fresh and tangible for that individual member. So, Bobby, what do you think?
Oops, turn my mic off. Well, actually, that's what tonight's all about. So the three gentlemen we have here, I don't want to really talk about it because we got these guys here. There's a lot of things, as I suspected, are different with larger urban metropolitan departments. And I think we've heard the challenges they have with their training. So I think what we're going to ask these three guys, instead of me taking up time, is you've been involved in urban departments, and now you've all been involved in small volunteer or combination departments, which is where my whole career has been in those areas. What do you say we can do better? What are the challenges in training of these smaller mixed or volunteer fire departments? And what are the things that you think that you could do better by seeing both? Because you guys have been in both worlds and seen both worlds. So give us some advice on how we could do better with training in either small mixed or volunteer fire departments, if you guys would. Whoever wants to start off.
I'll jump in and I'll give kudos to Mike. He's doing, to kind of answer Doug's question. Hi, Doug, if you're paying it. Hi, Doug, if you're listening. Don't always just train at the firehouse. Mike's found us, through some demolition contractors. We've been going out to some actual buildings that are getting ready to get demoed. I mean, they're all safe. They're still sound. They're not, being held up by toothpicks, and doing evolutions there. You're not just pulling a hand line in the parking lot. Anybody can do that. But Mike's trying to make it interesting is, hey, we got this building. Let's go do this, so change of scenery sometimes might just be all that you need to spark some interest. And then, the guys will get back and then they'll call somebody, man, where are we at drill tonight? We weren't at the firehouse. We went up to, the ABC restaurant's getting ready to get torn down, man. We pulled hand lines through there, through ladders, busted windows. We actually got to do things instead of simulating doing them. So that might be one way to try to pique interest. So,
Bobby, you said something about the struggles of, training for rural or combination departments. That is the struggle. Is that totally? Because I'll give you, for instance, let's just say you have a young firefighter who is into the job, into training, wants the knowledge, wants the skills, and you're training him. You're going to lose him or her to a career department because that's going to be their vision. And then within, 3 to 5 years, you're going to be starting over again and trying to find that fit. So the struggle for that role combination department is the struggle of just keeping those members. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a major struggle in a volunteer or mixed department. Um, Going to what Dypsky said, that is, I think, vital when it comes to any training, is to make it as realistic as you possibly can, and make it related to your jurisdiction, not just something you saw on the internet, not something that happened in FDNY, but make it so that it's tailored specifically to your manpower, to your jurisdictional needs, all the way down to your apparatus and the tools that you're carrying, not what you saw on the internet or what another department does. I think if you can tie that in to your training, and then, as Dypsky said, change the environment up, put them in the most realistic environment possible, then you're going to create an atmosphere of learning that far surpasses sitting around doing a chalk talk or pulling lines in the back parking lot. That is important. And to piggyback on what Steve just said, one major plague of a mixed department, and even more specifically the volunteer department, is the turnover rate is obviously is astronomical, but the culture in itself is more important than the training in any department. That's just a general rule. And I think a lot of departments, the smaller, struggle with their culture and what they want to be. Do they want to be a traditional fire department? Do they need to be a department that is more dynamic? We talked earlier about having specific riding positions. Trevor brought that up, like teaching them to riding positions. And that's all culture. That's what a department culture calls for. And some departments have that. Ocean City's one that doesn't. You are riding in one position on one shift, and then a completely different one on the next with a completely different crew. So you're taking a lot of what I think firefighters really value when they enter this job. And it doesn't matter whether they enter it from a volunteer standpoint or whether they, go to a major city. They get in the job because of what they think the culture is going to be. And then they're either going to be disappointed by it and let down, or they're going to embrace whatever that culture is and want to prolong it and promote it. So I think the struggle of finding the culture, finding your specific culture is first and foremost before you ever discuss how to make training better, because that is where your initial buy-in comes into play. And volunteer organizations are plagued not only by the revolving door of its personnel, as it recruits and loses, the attrition rate, but they're also plagued by the turnover of their administration. Mm-hmm. That administrative turnover, and even your officers that are in the field, is so regular that developing a culture that's going to stick is going to be difficult to do because of that turnover. Because with every turnover comes a new idea. With every new chief comes a new way. With every new lieutenant, year to year, becomes a new field commander. And the culture, if it's not solidified, is non-existent. And a lot of your other buy-ins get lost because of it at the firefighter level. So, that is something that plagues, I think, the volunteer world, is trying to lay a foundation that their culture will thrive in regardless of the rapid turnover rates of their administration. And I think that proves to be a problem because volunteer organizations are heavily reliant on their administration for everything. Whereas, in major cities, of course, our administration dictates policy, But as we already talked about, in the last hour, yeah, sure, administration dictates your MOPs and, your academy, puts out there its basic training, but the meat and potatoes of the training for any jurisdiction does not come from its academy. It comes from its men out in the field, its senior men, its veterans.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that the meat and potatoes come from, and that is something that hampers the volunteer world. And I say that because of the turnover. I can specifically tell you that my truck company, the people that I've been working with, I was working up until very recently with the same guys, with the exception of one officer turnover for the last 13 years. That's 13 years with the same men beside you, riding in the front seats, riding in the back seats. You grow up with these men. And the training ensues off of incident after incident after incident. You go out there and you do more and more training. And for departments that don't have crew integrity, for departments that don't have the ability to experience these incidents at a regular clip, it becomes very difficult to instill that buy-in without a solid culture to lean on. Because at the end of the day, when you don't have the incidents, you don't have the crew integrity, even if training is subpar, the fallback is always the culture, what was already pre-established. And I think that that's something that is not addressed as much as it should be. We always try to put emphasis on, well, we're just not trained enough, or whether maybe we just need to change our hiring practices, or this or that, or it's the apparatus, or what have you. There's a whole slew of excuses, but culture is ultimately the most important thing, I think, and that's dictated mostly by the administration in both services, and it is carried out throughout the generations by the guys that are in the trenches. But it's, it starts at the top.
Very well put.
Yeah, Ben, I think I'm gonna do my closing. We're going over an hour now.
Go ahead, brother.
I think from doing training for a long time, and I know Steve taught with me for a while at Delaware State Fire School, which was a statewide fire academy, basically for volunteers. And we did that for a while, and I'll never forget it. I worked with a guy, I'll call him out, Scotty Lawson, a well-respected captain from Fairfax County that happened to live in Delaware and helped us teach. And we used to teach with a hard fist back then, many years ago. And we just, if you didn't crawl in the building, we make you crawl around the building after you got out and embarrass you and things like that. And I remember Scotty, we were doing some of that stuff, and we did it because we thought that it would add the stress to the firefighter that you couldn't give in a burn building was a reason why we said we did it. And Scotty said, "What are you guys doing?" And I said, "We're doing this because we want to get into reality." And he's like, "We don't have time for this." He said, "You got enough time to explain to these people what you want them to do. They have enough time to do it, and you have enough time to explain them what they did. So they're crawling around the building in the grass outside. They're not learning anything." And I kind of stepped back for a minute and thought, yeah, and I thought maybe there's something to this. And then I think FDIC was kind of an opening to me. When FDIC many years ago used to be really for instructors. Years ago, it's pretty much more of a training academy kind of thing now for learning things, but it was an instructor thing. And everything that we were learning in FDIC was taught with respect. So if Greg Dypsky was teaching something, or Trevor or Mike was teaching something out there, it was in the eyes of, I'm going to teach another instructor how to teach this. And it was very respectful. And what I learned through all of this, with the exception of the very beginning basic training that these guys and girls get, what I learned from all of this is that if you do disrespectful training, they're not going to learn a thing. If you talk down to these people, if you treat them like dogs, if you make them crawl around the building outside, they are simply not going to learn anything except for you're a jerk. That's all. Their take home is going to be that. And so I think the idea is to have respect, but not be a coward. That means have respect, but don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in at the same time. But if Greg and I are teaching people how to cut metal, and we have a volunteer guy that's brand new in there, and he's come out of 20 years working in the welding shop, I'm pretty sure he knows more about cutting metal than we do. And that's kind of that respect thing, is everybody on the job knows something that we don't know, no matter where we are in that job. And so that's where that respect comes from. We don't know what anyone's background is really. And so I think I've always found that, especially like with Strike the Box training, is that respectful training just gets way, way better results in the whole thing. So I think that's one of my messages to all the small volunteer fire departments is back down a little bit. Go about 80 or 90%, give people a little room to learn. Don't be so critical, and kind of let things flow. And I think things kind of go better that way. So thank you for you three guys coming on. It's been awesome. I learned things about departments I've never been involved with. It's been great hearing you guys, and thanks everybody for watching. So, all right, Ben.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thank you very much.
Dip, you wanna have any closing thoughts or share some closing thoughts with us?
Well, one of the things that for anybody who's out there, just because you've done it once doesn't mean you're proficient at it. I pulled a hand line last week at training. Well, this week we're going to pull hand lines again. Nah, I'm not going to show up for training. I've done it once. So a lot of times people think that's automatically going to come back. No, it's you hear it all over the place. Sets and reps. You got to do it. And to use one of Bobby McGee's things about football, that team didn't run that play on a whim. They practiced it the whole time until they couldn't get it wrong, until it was muscle memory. That should be the way when you do training. Just don't think I've done it once, I've got this, and then move on. So that's always train. I've been in the fire service for a long time, and I'm still learning something new. Mike's taken over. Mike showed us some different ways I never even thought of to throw ladders and to heal and do. So, you're always learning. If you think you've known it, if you think that you know it all, you're in the wrong profession. Or volunteer or career, it doesn't matter. You're in the wrong trade. If you think you know it all, there's always something new out there. So, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Steve?
This has been fun. Thank you very much. And the only thing I would say is master the basics. It's key. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, I think Steve and Dypsky said it the best you can. You have to be a self-starter. Don't come in the firehouse and get to know the remote control better than you know the tools on your rig. You have to be a self-starter. You have to be a student of the trade, and you need that is contagious. It's important to have people like that around you. It is contagious. Unfortunately, so is laziness. So you have to find it in yourself to want to do that on a daily basis when you come to work, and by far the fundamentals are the most important thing in this job. The fundamentals are the foundation for everything else you're going to do. So, that they have to be, that time has got to be spent on them and promoting them at all levels of training. So, and thank you guys so much. It was awesome being with all you guys. Great conversation, great questions.
Hey, Mike, real quick,
Yes,
to play off what you a couple years ago at FDIC, one of the instructors said, don't go to the firehouse and become a recliner pilot. Or don't fly the recliner. So I thought it was kind of funny. Said,
Right.
What you just said. Don't become a recliner pilot.
Right. Exactly. That's right.
That's good stuff. Boss man?
All right, brothers, thank you all for being on here. Again, these are folks that around this screen I have a great deal of respect for because they're firemen. And what that means is that they've been there, they've done that, they've paid their pound of flesh, but they want to make sure that other people learn from not only the good things they've done, but also some of the mistakes they might have made. So that's what it's all about, is passing this information along. I look back over my career. I've had a great career, and I was fortunate to have Dougie Scott, who, when I was a cadet, as Greg was mentioning earlier, that junior person who would come in, right after I got out of high school English class and came in and said, "Oh, Mr. Scott, will you please teach me how to use this HUMAT valve or show me some high?" And I guarantee he was probably tired. He would have loved to have been sitting down and being that recliner pilot. Not that he ever was, but he might have had young kids at home and was coming to work to get a break. You know how that goes sometimes. But this is a guy who, no matter what, would if I asked to say, "Hey, I want to learn something," he would take the next several hours just to take me out back to the fire station or back to Northside Park and make sure that whatever question I had was answered and answered well, and that I knew what I was doing at the end of that. So strive to be that kind of officer. The Doug Scotts of the world. Those kind of people who really kind of establish that kind of credibility, because no matter what their title is at the time, they want to make sure they pass that along. So whether you've been in for 6 months, 6 years, 6 days, or 60 years, your obligation is to pass it along. And all the folks on this screen have that same mindset. They have that culture of training. And yes, there's time and place that we try to break someone down to build them back up in the academies. There's time and place and purpose for that. But when we're trying to share information at the company level, especially these are the people, the brothers and sisters we're working with, whether they're career or volunteer. So, I just definitely want to throw that shout out to Scotty. And one last thing too is a lot of times we'll use our younger members, our probationary members, sometimes to do teach backs and say, "All right, hey, company drill today is you're going to show us everything about the 2.5 gallon pressurized water extinguisher. You're doing the company drill today." Mm-hmm. And it's amazing how much time and research they'll put into this. And here they're having to teach to a company full of folks that are way senior to them and have used that tool a million times over. But every now and then, the old dogs learn a new trick, and it's kind of interesting to see. But it also builds that younger person's confidence, and they're part of us. They understand how important it is, and it's that culture training that starts out, and that their word and their ability to help try to teach the rest of the crew and everybody paying full attention to it, not sitting there, playing on their cell phones or doing stupid crap. They're paying attention and trying to mentor this person. So it starts early. In the academies, yes, they teach minimum standards. And if you only stick to minimum standards, only expect minimum results. You've got to go past that. And everybody on this screen takes that to heart and have developed a lot of firefighters. And, it's about firemen teaching firemen how to be firemen. So, I appreciate everybody on here, and thank you for all the time and effort you put in. So with that, Ben,
Trevor, I got one thing.
Yes, sir.
If you got a second.
I got a second. It's your house. We're paying rent, bro.
Sorry. When I was Officer Rescue 2, one of the senior technicians on the other shift, Billy Wetzel. I don't know if anybody knows Billy, but he told me about a thing they did on their shift, and I started implementing on my shift, the dice game. Come in and, all right, drill today. Everybody, here's dice. Whoever rolls, the first person to roll doubles has drill today. So then you got guys on their days off, like you said, Trevor, or researching something, because they never know. They might roll doubles, or next time, okay, first person to roll a 6, whatever. And then, over a couple of weeks, then I had guys coming to me in the morning saying, "Lou, we don't even need to do the dice game. I want to do drill today. I've researched this. This is what I want to go over." So that built, the guys were like, it a snowball effect. So that's just one different way to, get the guys into training. So.
That's awesome. I never heard about that, and besides the fact you all may have a gambling problem, that's a great. That's awesome.
They rolled the dice against the wall.
Yeah, but it just snowballed into the guy. After that, we didn't even break the dice out. The guys came in and were like, "No," and they started arguing. "No, man, next tour I'm going to do drill," and it's no, I got it. So
that's awesome.
It was pretty cool. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
All pumped up.
That's sweet. Like
it. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're going to wrap it up here, folks. Another great show. Thanks again to Dip, Steve, and Michael for joining us tonight. It was awesome. the only final comments that I would add, Mike made a great comment about the culture and building that in your station and your department, and that is huge. It shows the new members the buy-in from the leadership and the dedication that they have to have that. And if the new people are coming in and they're seeing this, they're seeing the culture. They want to be a part of that. They joined to be a part of something. So to help them do that. And then the only last thing I would say is you have to make it fun. Like you can do all this kind of stuff. You can do all the training, but if there's not some enjoyment, there's not some sort of camaraderie, some of that brotherhood, sisterhood that you're getting through that, then we need to kind of change our approach a little bit. Because if it's not fun and you're like Bobby was mentioning, I'm just getting my dick kicked in every time I do this, well, I'm not coming back. So make it fun, make it enjoyable. So that's all we have for tonight. We'll be back in 2 weeks on the 18th. We're going to be talking. I'm going to say we're going to be doing. That would be wrong. We're going to be talking with a couple ladies about women in the fire service. Now we put it all together, and that's where it's really messed up. So I apologize. February 18th, women in the fire service. I'm going to be in trouble already. So again, thanks for joining us.
Not be here.
Say what?
Ben may not be here, but we'll have.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to be allowed to come back on for that.
Good show while it lasts.
So, some great news if you guys haven't seen Strike the Box Thirsty Thursdays. We now are on podcasts, so you can get it on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all kinds of stuff. So if you guys are looking for some listening material on your travels, you don't have to go and have YouTube open on your phone the whole time. You can get it and download it to your phone. And we also, on our website, we have an online store. We can get some apparel, hats and decals, that kind of stuff. So check that out. And until then, we'll see you on the 18th. So everybody stay safe, be good, take care. And cheers, brothers. Thanks, guys. It was a good one.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Deuces.